Welcome to the Moving to Denver podcast with your host, Haley Bartlett, your Aussie agent. Hey guys, we are back for another episode and I am here with Katherine Patterson today. She has moved around the world, quite literally. So she has a lot of great information for us and she's going to share that with us today. So we're going to get going and I am going to hand it over to her to let us know a little bit about her and what she is doing with herself right now in the Denver area.
Thanks, Haley. I'm Katherine McGraw Patterson. Most people know me as KP. I'm a brand and business strategist. I get to help small business owners and entrepreneurs who are ready to grow their business past the startup stage. I'm also a speaker and an author, and I'm founder of Wevo Network, which is a women's entrepreneur and business owners network that is focused on professional development and also community building through the shared experience of being a woman business owner. So I've been in Denver, actually this year was my 26th year. I've left twice and come back. So, but altogether in my life, I have moved 17 times. I've lived in 7 states, 4 countries, and I'm a professional new girl. So I've moved a lot, both as a child and as a single, and then as a married with no children, and then as a mom of 2. So I've moved internationally with a child, and I've moved within states and between countries. So yeah, to ask me about moving, I got it.
You sure have. So you said 17 times.
Well, actually, I misspoke. I've lived in 17 cities. I've actually moved a total of 20 times. So I have moved away from Denver and moved back. So that's how that works. So I've moved to the same city, moved away and come back to Dallas and to Denver a couple of times. And so 17 cities, 7 states, 4 countries for 20 total moves.
Wow. But who's keeping count, right?
Who's keeping count?
So I just want to make a disclaimer that if anybody hears growling, it is not my stomach and I am not farting. It is my dog who is laying right next to me and groaning. I don't know what her problem is, but you also may hear KP's dog barking as well.
Which will then get Haley's dog barking and it'll be a party.
So going back to these moves, what were the 4 different countries that you've lived in?
I've lived in, when I was born, my parents were living in Venezuela. And then during my father's graduate school years, we lived in Honduras for a few semesters while he worked on a Chiquita banana plantation. And I have also lived in Hong Kong and then, of course, the U.S.
So which move was the most challenging for you?
Oh, I think, that's hard because, moving as a child and not having any agency in that move is really, really hard. In fact, I like to say I have trauma with a little T over moving. But, moving as an adult is equally as hard because I think I certainly recognize the challenges that I'm going to face. Moving home from Hong Kong was probably the most emotionally challenging move. I loved being an expat. I loved it. I had amazing friends. As you know, Haley, being an expat is, unless you've done it, you can't describe to anybody the impact it has on you as a person.
Absolutely.
I cried for 6 months before we moved home, and I cried for probably a year after we moved home. It just was I just missed it so much. But moving to Katy, Texas was also very traumatic for me. I'm originally from Texas. I had been to Katy many times in college, and I was not ready to move to that particular area. And yet 2 years later, when we moved back to Denver, I didn't want to leave Katy. So, I think that now I face moves with a lot more awareness around the challenges that I'm going to face and how emotionally difficult it can be. And so I think as I get older, they get harder and harder. I'm really hoping, I'm touching wood, I'm really hoping that we're not going to be moving ever again, but certainly my my history tells me never say never, right? Never say never,
Right.
that you're not going to move again. So
Yes, I tell my husband that because he's like, so we bought this house a year ago and he's like, I'm not moving out of this house. And I'm like, well, that's what you say. That's what you
don't jinx yourself.
say. But you know that I have a gypsy soul and
I know. And, moving is exciting. And it's, so right now, for instance, my husband works in another city. And so we're currently living apart, although we're fine. And just for various reasons, we've decided that moving the whole family is not the right answer for us right now. And yet I go down to visit him. He's down in the Durango area. And the part of me that likes that, the gypsy soul, that wants the change, that wants something new, is like, oh my God, it'd be so cool to live down here. And I look at the houses, even though I know we're not moving. I still look at houses. I still send him listings like, hey, if you buy me this house, I'll move in a couple of alpacas because I really want some alpacas. But but I also know it would be really, really difficult emotionally to do that. And so I'm happy to stay where I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Moving, I think I'm like this with travel too, right? I like all the planning and I like the looking at things, like you said, looking at houses, and I like, plotting out things and, what would we do in this new city and it's fun doing that. But then when you get there, you can feel totally different to when you were planning it out.
Yeah. And, I've moved enough times to know that every time you move is not necessarily socially successful. Sometimes you slip right into that new community and it's like, you've been there your whole life. And other times you can spend a lot of time alone. It takes a lot of intention and planning to create a situation for yourself where you can make friends quickly and you can plug into the community quickly so that you don't have that kind of lag time of not being engaged socially.
Yeah. Yep. So what would you say was one of the hardest lessons you've learned during a move?
The hardest lesson I learned during a move was I didn't plug into the right groups. So I did spend quite a bit of time kind of trying to connect with people, and this was pre-meetup, this was pre-Eventbrite, pre-interwebs, when it made it so easy to connect with people. And so I thought, so it was when we moved home from Hong Kong, we moved to Colorado, to Arvada. And I thought that having a child in school would automatically enable me to connect with other people. And she was in preschool, so there was no PTA yet for that age. And I moved into an older neighborhood of, original residents that their families had grown. And so there weren't a lot of children in the neighborhood. It was a beautiful neighborhood, but there was not a lot of young kids playing together and running in and out of houses like you and I probably grew up. And then to add on top of that, Colorado has open choice for schooling. And my daughter was choiced into a school in a different neighborhood for the gifted and talented program. So even the kids she was going to school with didn't live in our neighborhood.
Right.
And so it just made it really, really difficult to connect with other moms of young children or my neighbors, because everybody was aged and they had their own thing going on. And here I was, this young mom, and it was hard. And when we left, I realized I had been very, very lonely for 7 years. We lived there 7 years, and I thought I was happy when I was there until I moved to a new neighborhood in Katy, Texas. And of course, a new neighborhood in Katy is full of young families. Everybody went to the same school, and we were brand new. We were the fourth house on the block. So everybody there was just eager to connect and make relationships with their neighbors. And in hindsight, I realized that I had been very lonely and probably not very intentional about how I plugged into different groups and how I connected with people. So I definitely learned my lesson.
Yeah, it is super important. And it's interesting that you bring up the choice school options here in Colorado, because that is a problem here. Not all kids are going to school from the neighborhood. And my son complains about that here. He's like, well, some of them go to different schools and I don't go to that school. And I'm like, yeah, but you go to the neighborhood school for a
Yeah.
reason. Like,
Yeah.
And we do have kids in and out, and he just likes to know everybody. My son thinks he should know everybody.
Diplomat Jack. Yeah. No, I mean, it's really hard. And, in elementary, you go to school and kids live, we live in Broomfield. My kids went to school with people who lived in Erie and Lafayette, 20, 30 minutes away. And
Right.
that's a real drag when it comes to play dates, right?
Yep.
It's a real drag when you just want to hang out. And so I was more than happy to, when we made the move to Broomfield, we were very intentional about, this is the school that we want to go to. And we made sacrifices to move into the neighborhood because Broomfield's quite expensive. We made sacrifices to move into the neighborhood that fed into that school, precisely because I didn't want to have to drive my kids to school. I didn't want to have to drive them to all of their play dates. And I wanted them to be settled into a community where they would grow up with the kids and go with them to school for years and years and years and build that sense of belonging that I never had when I grew up.
Right. So you just mentioned you live in Broomfield.
Yes.
So tell everybody what you love about living there.
Well, for me, I love it. It has a very small town feel. There's a joke about the Broomfield bubble. It's a very gentle place to live, I think, personally. My children love it. Sorry, speaking of my child. Okay. Yes. Sorry. I'm sorry.
It happens.
It's a very, it's an older area, although there are some new construction. I live in what's considered old Broomfield. Most of the west side of town is fairly new, so I can't speak to that part. That's probably closer to my experience in KB. The schools are phenomenal. It feels small. You go out to the grocery store, you see somebody you know. You go out to dinner, you see somebody you know. You go to the gym, you see people that you know. And so I like that because for me, I really enjoy that sense of community and that sense of being really plugged into what's going on.
Right.
And so, the term bedroom community really, I think, applies here because although industry and business has moved out this direction to Interlochen, and a lot of people who live here don't necessarily commute very far to work, it's just a really lovely place to be. The people are nice. There's a lot of transplants, so you don't feel like you're an outsider. I just really love it.
Yeah, I had another Aussie on my podcast, and she lives in Broomfield, and she practically said the same thing. That's what she loves about it. She'd moved around quite a bit too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to some interesting countries. I was like, wow, like she got to live in France and
oh, nice.
Fun countries.
Yeah. Well, Hong Kong was fun.
So was that one of your favorite places to live?
Yes.
Do you think
I would have stayed there forever. In fact, since then, my husband, obviously having worked there, has a specialty of working with the Asian suppliers. He's in supply chain, so that makes sense. So we moved back to the States in 2002, and for 17 years I have said, listen, if somebody offers you a job, don't feel like you have to ask me for permission. Like, just take the job and we will move, And so he laughs at me and I'm like, I'm really not kidding. Like, I would totally go. His newest employer, their factories are in Vietnam, which happens to be one of my very favorite countries to visit. And I said, if you get an opportunity, and he's like, oh, I'm working on it. So, maybe.
Maybe you'll get to go on another adventure, even though you said you didn't want to, but you would if it was certain places.
I know how to do the expat life. There's tons of American Women's Association has chapters all over the world. And so it's actually easier to plug into community when you're an expat, I have found, than when you're in your home country. In fact, you and I have a common contact, Shannon Noble, who she was an expat in Germany, and she so enjoyed that model of the intentional connections that you were able to build there through the women's group, that she came home and founded Mod Bombs on that same
Right.
model, to give people the opportunity to connect in different ways. So, it's easier because the mechanisms for connecting have already been put in place. So.
And I think that definitely depends on where you are. St. Louis, there was nothing. I came across a couple of other Aussies, but man, they had bad attitudes about living in America.
Oh,
and,
really?
Yeah. And there's people, so on Facebook, I'll have my little rant now. On Facebook, there are Australians living in America pages, and so many of them are just negativity, like people that don't like living here. And I'm the kind of person that just wants to say, like, well, if you don't like it, go home. Like, because when you live in that state of misery all the time, or that's only seeing the negative, then that's going to be your life experience.
Yes.
And
I don't law of attraction. The energy you put out is the energy you get back, right?
Right. And I don't want to be around people like that. But here they have an Anzac women's group, so Australia and New Zealand.
Yes.
Women's group. They have Aussies in Denver that get together. We have a bunch of Australians on this side of town, and we get together and have lunch every now and then. So there is, that more of the connection, when in St. Louis there was nothing like that. St. Louis was tough. Definitely that was a tough move. But once I got to Denver, I felt like I was at home again. I was like, okay, this is a good spot for me. But yeah, definitely that negativity is never good. Like, don't bring it with you on a move.
No, don't, because that's going to be how you show up in every situation. If you're like, nobody's going to want to be your friend. Nobody's going to want to connect with you, So, yeah. So tell me what you suggest to people when they move. How do they plug into the community, and feel like they belong?
Right. So I've done a couple episodes on this because I think it's super important. My keys were always, first was finding a place that I felt comfortable, whether it be a coffee shop, the library, a brewery, just a place that felt comfortable to me. And then going there on a regular basis, getting to know the people that work there, getting to know people that came in. And that's always kind of my first comfort spot. So, okay, now I feel like I have a comfortable place that makes me feel kind of like I'm at home, and makes me feel comfortable. And then after that, because I suffer, believe it or not, from a little bit of social anxiety.
Same.
People wouldn't guess it, but I do. And so once I have that comfort kind of thing going, then I feel like I can get out and meet other people. And then for me, it's been joining, groups. Like I've had Jack, so joining mums groups, or joining a women's business group, or finding something on Meetup, whether it's in Denver has a bunch of that kind of stuff. Women's hiking groups, the gym. So just finding people, and you have to put yourself out there. You just have to get over that hurdle of not wanting to, because otherwise you just lock yourself up inside, which is not good. So it's just, for me, it's putting yourself out there. Like, just jump in, just do it.
Oh, for sure. And I love the meetups and Eventbrite. If I had had that when I was younger, I feel like a lot of my moves would have been more successful, because what's great about those is you don't have to do something that you don't enjoy. You don't have to go to a singles night or church or, volunteer. You don't have to do things you don't like in order to connect with people. You can find exactly what you like doing: hiking, sewing, movie nights, whatever it is. There's like a group for everybody. And so I love that, because it has really facilitated people who are trying to connect, and yet they're not really comfortable getting out of their zone of fun. Right.
And if I can't, in St. Louis, I couldn't find a group, so I made one. And, you know, I have groups that I run here too. I have my mum's beer group because I don't like to drink wine. I like to drink beer. I like to go to different breweries. So I was like, well, I'm just going to start my own group because
there you go.
There was plenty of mums' nights out where they went to, you know, drank wine and cocktails and that kind of stuff. I'm just not that fancy, unfortunately. I just like to, you know, crack open a beer and drink it.
Right.
That makes me happy. So, yeah, if there's not a group, then start one.
Exactly. And, you know, I talk about that in my book because now you're getting into kind of the networking area, right? You're networking to make friends. And that is that when you start a group, you're actually giving grace to other people who are looking for something. And so they're going to come and connect with you because they're just so grateful that you've given them a place that they feel comfortable. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of times for instance, when I moved to Katy, the first thing I did was I reached out to the HOA and asked them, they had a social group for our neighborhood. And I immediately got onto the social planning group because I know myself and I'm not a great Indian, but I'm a great chief. And so by putting myself in that position of being involved in the planning, it allows me to be in a position where everybody comes to meet me, right? The onus is not necessarily on me to go meet everybody, but everybody is coming into an event that I've helped organize. And so I have a role. I don't do well in groups or organizations where I don't have a role. And so that's how I've solved that for myself when I've moved is PTA, I immediately volunteered, or the neighborhood social group, I immediately volunteered because that then gives me a purpose and it makes it easier to connect with people because you're giving and you're engaged and you're not just showing up and having to
struggle. Right.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things, if people are looking for recommendations, if you're facing a move and you're not super comfortable with it or you're worried about it, is think about how you like to interact. When it comes to business networking, I call it your networking style, and it's a combination of your learning style and your social style. But think about how you show up as your best self. What environments and what groups and what activities do you feel most authentic in? And go find those activities. If you're a hiker, go hike and then talk to the person that's hiking next to you. Or if you are all in on your children because they're at that age, go join the PTA and contribute to the school, because you're going to find like-minded people. When you think about, I really enjoy crafting, or I really enjoy volunteering, or I really enjoy being outside, you're going to find people who have the same interests, and that immediately makes it easier to make friends. And as soon as you have friends, then the move becomes so much easier.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. Yeah. Once again, just put yourself out there.
Put yourself out there.
It's what you have to do.
Hey, it sucks. I'm not going to lie. It sucks. And it's hard. And, but if you're moving for a career or for family reasons or something outside of your control, you have to take some chance. You have to take the risk, and you have to put yourself out there if you want to connect with people. And that community is what's going to make the move successful for you. It's going to be what helps you get over the sadness of leaving your last place, of your uncertainty. Shoot, the Broomfield moms groups and stuff on Facebook are fantastic for that, because we all exchange, where do I find a pediatrician? Where do I find a dentist? Getting plugged into groups like that really smooths the way to being part of that community.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. They are wonderful resources.
Yes.
For sure. All those pages. And I do talk with a lot of people that are moving here, and most of them are wives that are coming because of their husband's job.
And it's hard being a trailing spouse, because you did not choose that. You did not choose that move.
Right.
And, frequently if most husbands, I think, are kind of like my husband, where they're not as involved in the community. That's kind of the wife's job. And so all they see is, well, I have to move to get the success that I want, and we want to support them, but we're really the ones that are uprooting everything, and the children, and we have to find the new school, and we have to find the new Girl Scout troop, and we have to find the new dance class, and all of those things. And the faster you can plug into a community, whether it's through your church or through PTA or through a meetup group or through a business group, whatever it is, the easier that transition is, because not only do you begin to emotionally, transfer emotionally from your last place to your new place, but you also tap into all those resources that then make the logistics of the move so much easier as well.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. And then some of us have, left businesses and things behind that we've run as well. And then that can become a whole other level of frustration.
It is. It's hard. It's hard. I started my business in Hong Kong. I moved it to the US. So of course I lost 99% of my Hong Kong clients because of the time change.
Right.
It just became too difficult for the type of service that I provide for us to connect. I moved it from Denver to Katy. I moved it in Katy, Texas. I moved it back from Katy to Denver. So I have moved this darn business with me, internationally, and then within state to state. And you have to start all over, depending on the business, you have to start all over again. Luckily Zoom and email and all of those things make it so much easier if you provide a service to continue to provide the service to people. I work with clients from Connecticut to Alaska. So, I have a national business. I'm just happen to be in Colorado.
Right.
And definitely if you're offering a product, it's easier to do than ever. But it's still, there can be some resentment there for sure of, I didn't want to do this. I was fine where I was. And husband comes home and says, guess what? We're moving to, and oh, great. Awesome.
Right. And then I moved for love. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. I'll be the one that moves. But I left a successful career. I was only 24, but I had built myself into a successful career as an employment consultant. I loved the job, and then I came to America and couldn't do anything. Yeah. And I swear, I just sat on the couch and cried while I watched Dawson's Creek for 9 months until I decided that I should get myself.
There are worse things.
And do something.
It's really hard. And, you came for love, but that's one little tiny slice of that pie. And right. So, my heart goes out to anyone who is being asked to move, and they're not 100% in control of that decision.
Yeah.
Because even if you are 100% in control of that decision, when I moved to Denver in 1993, I was single. I had a cat and a dog and a car, and I was like, I'm moving to Denver. And so I did. I moved up here. I had two friends here, and I was completely in control of that decision, and it was still hard. Right? I didn't have a safety net here like I had in Dallas when my dad was right around the corner. It still was hard. I still had to make friends. I still had to find a job. I still had to do things that I've never had to do before because I was all on my own. So, but even being in control of the situation can be challenging. But when you feel like that choice has been taken away from you, there's a whole bunch of emotional stuff that goes on behind the scenes that, therapy, I've been to therapy before because of moves, because I just felt like I had the rug pulled out from under me and I needed help to kind of right myself. And so there's no shame in being emotionally, wrung out over it. And I feel like we've gone into a really dark place in this conversation.
Oh, that's okay, because there are dark places.
Yeah. It can be really hard. And like I said, I start off with saying, I have come to realize in the last 2 years, I'm 51. I started therapy when I was 49 for some recent issues. And I realized at age 49 that I had real trauma. It's trauma with a little T. I understand there's bigger traumas in childhood than moving, but still, I have real trauma around it, and it impacts who I am to this day and how I go out into the world. And I've had to do a lot of work on that to be comfortable in new situations. And like I said, I'll admit, part of the reason my family is not moving to be with my husband right now is because of that trauma. And, you know, bless his heart, he's like, I don't really see a need for that right now. We can deal with that later. Because I think my head started to spin around when he came home and said, guess what? I got a job way down there. And I was like, what? So, yeah, there's Charlie.
You know what? Daisy's deaf now, so she can't even hear.
Oh, she can't hear it? Okay.
No, she's completely deaf.
Aw, sweet girl.
She's, you know, it's better for her. She has anxiety. Part of it's probably from moving around herself, because you know, she's done the move from St. Louis to Thornton, and Thornton to Thornton, and Thornton to Frederick. She's done it.
Yeah. Charlie accidentally got a double dose of CBD last night, so all night and this morning he's been super chill, but I think it's like wearing.
It just wore off just then.
It just wore off as the doorbell rang. He's like, wait, I'm supposed to be uptight. Okay, I better bark.
The things we do for our animals.
I know. He's my favorite, though. Don't tell the children, although they know he's my favorite.
So, wrapping up, do you have any other advice that you can give about moving, or, you know, any great stories you have that you can tell us?
I think my biggest advice is plug in. Find something in the community, whether it's PTA or, you know, our high school even has an after prom that's very, very active, or your church. Find something, find some place to land. And what's great these days is you can do all that research before you even leave your place of origin. And I recommend in my book that you reach out to hosts and hostesses of groups of meetups. I have a meetup for Weibo Network. I get questions all the time about what does it look like to be a part of it. What can you expect? And people who have started their own group are more than welcome, are more than happy to answer questions. Because they want people to come. And so do some research before you even go, and get excited about the new opportunities that you're going to have when you get to the other end. And find people who have common purpose, PTA, after prom, church, hiking, whatever it is. I think probably my most fun move was moving to Texas, because I'm from Texas. I'm a 7th generation Texan, and my husband is a Yankee. He's from Illinois, and he does not like Texas. So all in the months leading up to it, we would be looking at, and I'd say, oh, well, you know, snakes, and he doesn't like snakes. And so I'd tell him snake stories about Texas, because there's snakes everywhere. And he'd be like, what? And I'd say, at one time I said something like, oh, we don't want that house, it's too close to the woods and the javelina will be there. And he's like, oh my God, what is a javelina? And so I was like totally freaking him out about Texas before we even got there. And he just was like, whoa, he didn't know what to do with all that information. So, and then we got there, and of course there were tons of snakes and javelina in our neighborhood, and because we were in a brand new neighborhood, and so we would wake up and all the empty lots would have javelina trails through them from the night. And he just thought it was some sort of, he doesn't know what to do with Texas. And so I was just enjoying it.
You know what you do with those snakes? You just pick up a shovel and you chop their heads off. That's what you do.
Yes, except when you open up your kitchen pantry and the water moccasin has made it inside the house into your kitchen pantry, which never happened to me, but did happen to my neighbor. And and the alligators, there were alligators down the street in the pond. And so he just thought we had been, way even more than Hong Kong for him. The culture, the environment was so completely foreign to him. And
how interesting.
And I was like, we're going to go down and see the alligator. You want to go? No, don't want to do that. So I think it was just fun. It was fun for me to reconnect with my roots, because I left Texas in '93. And I very much identify as a Texan, but I obviously have chosen to live elsewhere. And so it was really fun for me to reconnect with that. But for him, it was like we had landed in an alien place. And just the accent and the political view, everything for him was just so foreign. And I was like, this is really funny because it feels like home to me. I feel very comfortable, but he was like, what's going to happen next? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's wait and see.
I feel like I might feel like that if I moved to Texas. Not the snakes and stuff, you know, I'm an Aussie.
Oh yeah, you're an Australian. Yeah.
You know, how stuff doesn't bother me. I remember moving to Illinois and I was out in my garden and a snake went by, grabbed the shovel, chop its head off. Matt's like, that's just a garter snake. And I'm like, I don't know, like all snakes in Australia are deadly. You got to kill them.
Right. So that would be a culture change. You don't necessarily want to kill all the snakes in the U.S. because some of them are nice snakes.
Right. But I think he was like, what the hell did I marry? Like, she's just out there with the shovel, like chopping heads off. What's she going to do to me? Like,
right? Oh, she's tough. The woman from Snowy River. Yeah.
Like, don't mess with me. Haven't you seen Crocodile Dundee?
Exactly. I want to see your name. Yeah. So that was kind of a fun move. But when we moved to Hong Kong, we had only been married. We got married because he was moving to Hong Kong. So he came home one day and he said, they want me to move to Hong Kong. And I said, well, you have to get married. And he said, yeah. And so we got married, and right after our honeymoon, he left. And I was here for 2 months closing the house and selling the cars and stuff. And then I went over and we got there about a month before the handover. So it was really fun because the first 5 years of our marriage, we spent overseas, not with friends and family around us. So that was really a special time for our family. Our daughter was born there, and we traveled so much and we went to so many places we wouldn't have gone to otherwise. And so that was a really fun time for us. But I think that the move to Texas and just freaking him out about all the stuff, it was the most fun.
I think that you were like lucky that you both didn't have family in that first 5 years of marriage, because I moved straight in. I was already married.
Tell us about that, Haley. Does your mother-in-law watch this podcast?
She might. I'm not going to say anything too terrible. I'm just, you know, families are different. And then the cultural difference as well from Australia, where we tend to just have it out and be like, well, okay, it's done now. Like, and then to move to the Midwest where it's not exactly like that. And for me to just carry on like, well, this is just how we do it. We just speak our minds. Yeah, it didn't really work out very well.
Not in the Midwest, it doesn't.
No.
My husband's from Illinois, so Midwestern boy. Went to school in Indiana at Purdue. We both relocated to Colorado, and then we met here. So for us, Colorado is our home as a family.
Right.
Our home base. And so we've never actually had family around us. Now, he had a ton of friends from college who all relocated out here. So we have what we call our chosen family, that we've been in a group since before we all got married, and now we all have kids going to college, and we spend all of our holidays and stuff together. But that's something that we did in Hong Kong as well, as we would gather all the strays at Thanksgiving or Christmas whenever anybody wasn't going home, and we would host, you know, big traditional meals like that. So you know, keeping some of those family traditions and sharing them with your new friends is a great way to also kind of honor where you came from, but also then make the transition a little bit smoother, because you can share it with new people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. All good tips.
Yeah.
Yes. I have many stories I could tell, but I probably shouldn't tell them on my podcast.
Okay. Well, let's go have a beer. With a beer.
Well, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. You know, I loved spending time with you, talking, chit-chatting.
I know. It's good. And we'll do it again next week.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that.
So thanks for being on the show. I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks everyone for listening, and I will be back next week with more information on moving, and not just moving to Denver. I think this information is great if you're moving to a different neighborhood, you know, to a different state. But yeah, thanks to my loyal listeners, and I'll be back next week.
Thanks for having me.